Hello, everyone. I hope that wherever you are, you're safe and well. My name is Marilyn Zakhour. I'm the CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs. We're a leadership and organizational development consultancy. And today you're joining us for one of the sessions at the 7th Annual Cosmic Conference, which is a 3-week virtual conference taking place between March 25th and April 17th. And while we typically hold this conference in October, the gravity of the events across the region made it clear to us that this conversation couldn't wait. And to support leaders where they need it the most, we chose to bring this year's edition forward and convene this conversation now. Our conference is titled Grounded and Limitless, Leading Organizations That Survive and Thrive. And through this conference, we're hoping to support leaders as they manage prolonged uncertainty. And at its core, the idea of being grounded and limitless is about both staying clear-eyed around reality, but also continuing to build what is possible. And to explore this, we've brought together more than 15 leaders, experts, and academics to make sense of what leadership requires in moments like these. And we're going to do it across 3 themes. Week 1, which is this week, is around the topic of enduring. How do you survive periods of uncertainty? And how can you connect? Today, we'll talk about that to the wisdom of the past to inform that. Adapt, week 2, is how we evolve in response to change. And the 3rd week, Thrive, is how we take lessons that we learn in times of crisis and turn them into competitive advantage. This week is week 1, of course, the week of endurance, and it's all about helping leaders face reality, preserve stability, protect what matters in moments of prolonged stress. We have 3 more webinars planned. The team will drop the links to the program in the chat below if you'd like to speak. If you'd like to join us. Our speaker, Rama Chakaki, who I will introduce very shortly, and I would love for you to actively participate in this session. So please share your reflections, your questions, your experiences, your reactions in the chat. There's many of you signed up for today's webinar, so I know that it's going to resonate and that many of you will have stories to share. And one last thing before we begin, and I introduce Rama. If you find value in this session and you want to give back, we ask only that you take our survey. We're conducting research to capture how leaders in our region are navigating uncertainty because we believe that others around the world can learn from us. Our team will drop a link in the chat to our Leading in the Arab World survey. If you have 5 minutes, it would mean the world to us. This very session is part of our Center Stage podcast season as well, dedicated to this topic, where we document, elevate, and codify leadership and organizational practices emerging from the Arab world. Today's session, Hikma, Indigenous Wisdom for Uncertain Times, with Rama Chakaki. Rama, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I look forward to our conversation, honestly, even, in preparation for this, and I'll introduce you in just a minute, but our team, Tala, prompted us to share some of the wisdom that we've kept from our elders. And so every member of our team shared something that came from a grandmother, an uncle, a distant cousin. And it's just been beautiful to see all the wisdom that we have within us and that we have inherited. And so I'm really thrilled to be talking about that today. Rama, let me quickly introduce you. Rama is a Syrian American impact tech entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. She's currently the president of the Qatar Science and Technology Park. And prior to this role, she was a partner at Transform VC, a Silicon Valley firm enabling 1,000 tech founders to impact 1 billion and make 1 billion by investing in deep tech with climate and social impact. Rama was instrumental in building the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in the Middle East. And in addition to her corporate roles, she runs an edtech nonprofit, the VIP Fund, supporting youth impacted by conflict. And she's been featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, The Monitor, Arab Women Rising, a Wharton School business publication, and The Power of Presence, a book by Joe Moore. Rama, thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into our topic, I just want to start with a quick check-in. How are you experiencing this moment of what is happening in the region today and the uncertainty around us?
Honestly, gratitude, because whenever I think I may be stressed, I reflect on what others might be feeling in Gaza, in Iran, in places where they're closer to the conflict. And I think how blessed I am to have a much lesser impact on my nerves, on my loved ones, on my physical well-being, and so blessed. Of course, I wish that could be sustained all the time, but we all have our little anxiety moments throughout the day.
Yes, and I think it's perfectly okay to recognize that we can be both grateful and anxious at the same time, and that's perfectly fine. I think a lot of the conversation this week has been about normalizing the fact that even if we are leaders, doesn't mean we have all the answers, and it doesn't mean that we're perfectly okay all the time. Now for today's conversation. So, we spoke a lot about this over the past few decades. In this region in particular, we've done a lot of work in adapting global models, whether it's leadership or management or entrepreneurship or whatever it may be, that are developed somewhere else. And we've learned a lot from them. They brought structure and scale, but they don't always fully respect or reflect the cultural, social, or economic realities that we're in. But we've always had our own wisdom over here, our own leadership, our own management, and our own innovation wisdom. And it's rooted in some of our values. This morning we had a workshop with Daniel Delati, returning to our purpose and to our values, to our spirituality. And all of this has given us a lived experience of navigating uncertainty. So the question is for us and for our discussion today is how we bring that wisdom back to the forefront, and we'll be exploring that together. Maybe the first question for you, Rama, is, as I said, like we've seen so much of adopted leadership and management models developed elsewhere and being used here in the region. Where have you seen this work, and where has it created a tension that deserves to be resolved?
So this morning, when I was thinking about the questions today, I did a quick online research about the oldest corporations that existed in this part of the world. And I came across one from Aleppo, Syria, that was in the soap business that, according to Google and Gemini, has been around for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, that's how old some of our institutions are. And then there are others like Ghrawi for a couple of 100 years, and banking in other areas. So if we go back in our history, we can find countless examples of institutions and companies, universities that were established by women from this part of the world. And with that comes a lot of knowledge that's been captured, whether in the written form or in our dialects, our religions, our sayings. And so today, I think if you look at the leftovers of the old souks in Damascus and in other places around the world, you'll see examples of, let's say, social entrepreneurship and social impact. A new concept, or people thought that it was a new concept and it was imported from the West, but in fact, social impact has been practiced throughout the ages in our old souks, where, for example, the two adjacent vendors that are both selling soap, if one had his full for the day, they would put a chair in front of their little decant to indicate that they've had their share and now it's time for their neighbor to make money. That's social impact and social cohesion at its best. And that's just one of many, many examples that we have where I found that social impact is indeed from us and coming back to us, but with the language of the modern day corporation.
That's really beautiful, actually. I attended a talk by Roy Casagranda. Maybe you know him. He's the historian at the Museum of the Future a few months ago. And he was actually sharing how some of the things like today, like our Deliveroo services, for example, he was sharing that the Arab world was amongst the first to transform economic surplus into these kinds of services, be it for food or laundry or whatever it may be, many hundred years ago. And so some of the examples that you just shared as well, I always remember that at school we had a class, I don't know if they still teach it, but we had a class called Tarikh al-Ulum 'Inda al-Arab. I was really bad at the Arabic language, but I became really good at this class because it piqued my interest. And it was really all about exploring how much the civilization has brought to the world, and how much, we have to be proud of, and maybe in some ways return to that. And staying a little bit on, how we see global frameworks maybe breaking when they enter here. What are, when we spoke, there were examples that you gave us, whether around how, family structures may or may not accommodate for the kind of, work ethics or leadership or management practices that we've imported into our systems. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So our environment used to integrate the built environment with the natural world. And so the way that people used to take siestas in the middle of the day because it's the height of heat, the way people would go back home to commune with their family, to rest, to recharge, and then come back to their places of work. When I was in Dubai in the early 2000s, that I experienced that shift because they went from a shorter earlier workday to a longer weekday because all of a sudden everybody was living very far away from their place of work and traffic was becoming problematic. But some of the conversations that were happening behind the scenes is one, the impact on the environment. Now you need more cooling for the bigger buildings, and so that has a negative impact. But also families, like the impact on women who couldn't keep up with these hours. They're professional Emirati women at the height of their career, but they can't compete with the men that are coming in and are putting in 12-hour days because we have social obligations that extend beyond our immediate family. And it's a must and it's a priority. So there are a lot of these examples where you see that the new framework of working broke quickly or didn't really merge well. And now we're seeing both East and West return to 4-day work weeks and, looking at how they can recreate that balance, really. I think we had more balance and now we have to figure out how to return to balance.
So if we did want to return, right? Because one of the things that struck us last year, we were convinced that our cosmic conference would be about leading in the Arab world, and so we spent a whole day as a team trying to do research about the research that exists about our own leadership models and stories and narratives. And the sad truth was that we couldn't find much. So there's not a lot of, let's say, formal documentation and education that really helps us to return to that knowledge. And when we spoke about the fact that this wisdom maybe today doesn't exist in formal education. If we did want to return to that wisdom and that balance, where would we seek it out?
So I noticed a class this summer in the States, or a course, a summer course, that brought tetas and kids together. And that the summer camp was the wisdom of tetas and jiddos transferred to their young. So that's number one, a great way for us to get this knowledge and seek it from our elders. I think now we have a window of opportunity to both grab that information and put it into artificial intelligence and make sure it's preserved for next generations. But like I said earlier, it's embedded in our amthal, it's locked into our old souks, in the majalis that people have, into the all facets of society, everywhere, old pictures and documents. And it can be easily unlocked in modern day contexts. Like, for example, what if we had a hackathon specifically for a particular topic of unveiling this information and packaging it into AI in a different form. So it really exists in everywhere. Most importantly, like in our old crafts and culture and like handicraft people who still maintain that. I'll give you just a quick example of one of our founders who's doing work around exotic animals and preserve and creating nutrition for camels and other such animals. That wisdom is locked in the trainers, and the trainers, many illiterate, but have passed down this wisdom generation after generation and have a very intimate knowledge of this beautiful creature that can produce so much for us. That can be the same in other industries and sectors.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, again, an anecdotal one is that I had a health issue for a few years, and I went to Western medicine and asked over again for the solution, and nothing came. And then I went to a holistic doctor, and then the things they asked me to do in order to heal my gut sounded like the things my grandmother would have told me. The things I've dismissed, like I don't know, drink bone broth first thing in the morning. I remember when my grandmother, used to do that, and we all found it really, really disgusting.
Yeah.
But I really think, as you say, like, but my daughter after me will not have experienced that. So, in some ways, there is a very critical moment for us to stay connected to that wisdom. We spoke about health, we spoke about knowledge of what is endemic to the region with your example just now. What other forms of wisdom do you think we can tap into?
So I think going back to a set of values, and that's something that I find oftentimes we get into our heads about creating values for corporations and modeling them after very modern day thinkers in all parts of the world. But if we were to go back to values that you and I grew up on in the region, again by our grandmothers and our elders, and especially those who didn't have formal educations, they were curious because that was the way of learning. They couldn't wait for someone to instruct them. So embedding curiosity as an element of every organization's values is key, and practicing that curiosity is
Mm.
also key. Oftentimes people separate their religious practice from their life, but the reason why we pray 5 times a day isn't just to pray for a sentient being, but rather to practice something. It's with practice that you're able to deepen it. And so practicing curiosity on a regular basis is key. And then, like curiosity, there are a lot of other values and intuition of mixing old and new. Yesterday, we were at a hospital and we were talking about locations of hospitals with the administration. And a Razi, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, decided on the location of a hospital by putting raw meat in different places of the city and then watching which one rots slower. And the one that was the slowest to rot was the healthiest environment. And that's where they ended up building a hospital because it's supposed to be a place of wellness. And so there are thousands of stories like that we can draw from.
Yeah, absolutely. You're making me think of similar stories in architecture, of course, like our ability to design buildings that stay cool and that we have now lost and have to replace with air conditioning. Every time we choose to turn our backs to some of that wisdom, we end up paying the price somehow. And what form of leadership wisdom would you say is in the region, in the sense of what do you observe about how we lead here that is worth preserving and worth, keeping front of mind for us? I'm sure, I've learned a lot, of course, from studying in Western universities. I'm a proud INSEAD grad. I've learned a lot from the rest of the world. But the question is more like, what do we have to teach the rest of the world?
I think those who I've learned from the most often tend to be the ones that are older and have been raised by the generations of those who didn't have a formal education. And so the practice of patience and how they apply that, the practice of apprenticeship and how they genuinely spend all that time working with those who are junior, the curiosity that I've just mentioned with asking a lot of questions and not being confined to the building or the program, but rather through storytelling, because connecting those dots through storytelling is a lot more meaningful and carries much more weight. And then the practice of speaking eloquently. The elders could come up with incredible poetry or pieces of the Injil or the Quran to attest to a certain situation or tell you stories about it. Today, you'd be hard pressed to find people that are so well practiced. And it goes back to that curiosity and this is what I learn. I learn from everything around me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think like one of the things that we joke about is that one of the things that we are very good at this region is a trigger word, which is the topic of resilience. But in all of the conversations leading up to this conference, one thing that kept coming up is the fact that people who are from this region maybe, and that's not always a badge of honor that we need to carry, but realistically though, in the face of this, maybe because we're used to more uncertainty, more disruption, we do have resilience as a collective capability. What do you think in our environment or in our history has led us to that, and what can we learn from that in order to think about how we can lead today?
So if you look at the roots of a tree and see how they turn around rocks to get to where they need to be, I think this is resilience with us. And so we understand that realities oftentimes are overcoming our ability to go down that straight path of success or whatever that we seem to think is the right way, and forces us to meander. But it also, along that, you get to see the different sides of people, because they're like, okay, I cannot be depressed or anxious all the time, so we'll use sarcasm as a way to deal with the situation. And if you look at the social media timelines of this part of the world at the height of the conflict, the sarcasm is just so refreshing, because it's an escape, but it's a very good escape because it lets you at least laugh and express in one mode, much better than anger, in my opinion. But there are ways that we've learned this resilience, watching the elders and what they've gone through, but also kind of watching nature and learning a lot from nature as a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. I always try to time how long it takes for my Lebanese groups to start having jokes when something horrible happens.
They're so deep and fun.
Yes, it's true. And like my favorite thing right now is to send these jokes to everyone, because at least they make things a bit lighthearted. The Lebanese are known for being great at partying. And I think it's mostly because, we say, if I'm going to die tomorrow, might as well have had a great day today. And a lot of that is kind of deeply ingrained. I think, I don't know when it was, maybe on Monday, we had a session with Sandra Saleme, and she was like, what are you guys doing to regulate? And I'm like, I am living life carpe diem style. And so, yes, it definitely feels like that's something that's ingrained in us. But I also feel like part of this, when we were doing our systems thinking conference last year, one of the really interesting findings that we saw is that people who grow up in collectivist cultures, so in community-oriented cultures like ourselves, are also better systems thinkers. Mm-hmm. And they're better at leveraging, first at seeing broken systems and identifying them, but just also at leveraging systems. And I think that also we see that response, the community response, is also so strong, which means that when we're faced with uncertainty, we don't have to deal with it alone. One of the examples you gave me was about, I think, research that was conducted in Syria by a German researcher. Yeah. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure. So we were talking about social networks, and this is about 10 years ago, the birth of social networks, or the rise of the social network, 20 years now. And the gentleman I was speaking with, an architect, his wife is German, and they lived in the old city, and she was doing her PhD on the Syrian social networks. And I thought, what, they exist? And she said, yeah, the traditional social networks, they relied on them at times of war to pass information, at times of disease to pass information, because they were the ones, they were talking all the time through their ziyarat. And in those ziyarat, they would be able to pass with lightning speed information from one end of old Damascus to another. And so, that's interesting that they're the ones that can do the fabric of society. And similarly, in the West Bank, women were the ones during the Intifada that held the society together, because the men were more under attack, and they were the ones that are able to share news and information and provide that support. But I just want to go back to one point about, again, where we get this wisdom from. I mean, in Islam, the concept of balance exists in the 99 names, but if you see that there's the angry and the merciful, and there's the different terms that draw us always back to center. And I think that during these times, what comes for me up the most is, how do you return to center? How do you always make sure that you're not being dragged by the news into the anger and the frustration, and how do you keep that balance with the humility and humor, and the more you're able to balance and center, the further away you can look past these stressful times.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, that's what this week has been about all across. And I think it's beautiful that we have places we can go to find that balance. Maybe just a question from the audience that I think is really interesting. Again, we're speaking here about community. You gave us a great example on social networks. Zaina asked, how can we bring out wisdom within our workplaces? How can we bring our peers together in order to extract their collective wisdom? If you had to maybe suggest to Zaina a way of leveraging the internal social networks of organizations, what would you say?
So we have two Slack channels, or rather in this case, whatever the team's equivalent of it are. One is a gratitude channel, and with gratitude, you do see that part of wisdom from people when they're expressing what they appreciate about the other. And then in the random channel, it's where people freely get to share. Some people who like poetry, other people who like certain humor or other topics. And it's a safe space that you can veer off of what work focus is. I think having those sessions, we also have an all hands on a weekly basis. And in it, you're able to also see the other side of the person, and people do come with those cultures if you give them that space to share them and think about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something as basic as bringing out a prompt question and just letting everybody answer it, I think it does a really beautiful job. This example I gave earlier, where Tala asked us to share one piece of wisdom from an elder, we'll combine all of these together. And every post I read was just beautiful. And it was a very simple question, but also we got to learn so much about each other and each other's grandparents or the sources of inspiration in our lives, and it really provided wisdom for all of us, I think. Community is definitely so one aspect of what we're good at. And earlier we spoke a little bit about innovation and how our cultures are actually very innovative, even if sometimes we forget all the innovation of the past. And recently you were featured on Afikra, where you spoke about that, about innovation rooted in our culture. And you described innovation as looking closely at what we've been good at as a region and then finding new ways to do those things based on our needs and our identity. Talk to us a little bit about how you see innovation playing out, and maybe why in times of crisis it's even more important to be able to build homegrown solutions.
Yeah. So one piece that comes up for me is a title of a book a friend wrote called "At Times of Terror, Wage Beauty." And I think this what I see is this waging beauty and trying, in the face of extreme conflict and adversity. A lot of founders are coming up with these ideas that are genuinely beautiful, and at the core, they're so meaningful because they're all about bringing together and coalescing and collaborating, as opposed to distancing and creating adversity. One recent initiative by a group that was looking at environmental impact of what's happening, and then coming up with new ways of harnessing water from air, or working with water. There's just the connectedness to nature was something that's very top of mind. So a lot of people are rallying to create solutions for humans, and this person's rallying to create solutions to also keep us very grounded and close to nature and preserve it. And then this other friend who was talking about seeds and how we need to make sure that we're maintaining the seeds and the diversity of the seeds of this region, because we had such a great diversity of that, and our soil. So there's just so many that come up for me that on a daily basis, the climate technologists or the social impact technologists are coming up with really beautiful ways to think near and long term. How do we maintain food security at this time, but also how do we preserve our land for generations to come?
And what do you think that leaders can do to nurture ecosystems that enable homegrown solutions to come to life?
Definitely have space for the others who are typically not part of incubators and accelerators. So we're very big on collaboration. We're collaborating with, for example, Mujadila, the Mosque and Women's Center for Islamic Debate. We're collaborating with um, WISE, the Education Institute, but we also are going out into the community and looking to collaborate with Hinat Selma, a local farm that's working on sustainable agriculture. The more diverse the community that comes into your incubators and accelerators and have very meaningful, well-rounded conversations, the more rooted and successful the solution might be. I think we err on bringing experts and only experts and forget about the other that needs to be in the room to make sure that it's it's well grounded.
Thank you for that. Speaking of others, I want to bring in a question from the audience. This is from Sana. She says, I'm curious about leadership and identity. So many of us who live here are not native, but we're either born here or we call this place a forever home. How are you seeing intersectional identities shape the face of leadership in this region?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's, I think, for many of us, both a cause to celebrate and, in some cases, a cause for stress. You know, as a Syrian American who grew up in Saudi, lived in the UAE, went back to the States, came back to Doha, I find I'm all over the place when it comes to in being from these different cultures. And my highs and lows are with whatever's happening in the news, and you get to a place where you're seriously conflicted. And this morning we were talking about this, and I said, I think my biggest stressor is not the worry about safety or security, but this feeling of discomfort because all of the happenings of the world are against my beliefs, and they're happening in my name as an American, or my name as, you know, someone who belongs to a particular. It's gotten to a point where I feel like I want to divorce all of these identities and just go back to humanity and say, let's just talk human to human. What are your values, Marilyn? What are my values? And if we connect on those, nothing else matters. And stop identifying ourselves by the national identity, but rather just by the value system that people connect on, because national identities are not succeeding.
That's really, really interesting, actually. It resonates with something that Dr. Connie was saying. So she's very US-centric. She lives and works in Boston. And she was saying, like, how in the US people don't want to know more about each other because they don't want their opinions of one another to get in the way of being able to work together. So they'd rather not ask and not find anything out about one another, rather than be able to sit with the plurality while still being able to find what is universal and what is, as you say, human and shared across all of us. So that tension is really interesting. Thank you for that. Speaking of another kind of form of identity, so Kahla here asks, thank you. She thanks us for this conversation and asked, in your view, what unique strengths do women bring when translating heritage and lived experience into innovation?
I love that you brought that up. Thank you, Kahla. I had read an article years ago by two women. One of them founded Atni magazine. That's understanding the next revolution is their tagline. And they were talking about feminine leadership and what feminine leadership brings. And I wish there were more conversations about the difference that creates balance between feminine and masculine leadership. One psychologist put it like this: if you send a man and a woman into a room and ask them to find something that's on the floor, the man comes in, they scan eye level, they walk out. The woman comes in, looks at the whole space, and then walks out. And that's a compliment. It's not a diss to men in the way they think, but we complement each other that way. We have the ability to think in a systems way, but also in a three-dimensional way that creates meaning. we don't often describe it as succinctly as we should. And I think that's where the men's leadership comes in. And together you can have the depth and breadth of any particular strategy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, this topic of feminine and masculine leadership really comes up a lot. It comes up a lot when I talk to female leaders in this region. In many ways, we all had to embody our masculine energy a lot more in order to grow and to have the careers that we wanted. And past a certain age or past a certain level of accomplishments where we don't need validation so much anymore, we find ourselves trying to re-explore the feminine side of our leadership and trying to carve out space for her again, right? Because we've pushed her aside a lot, and that exercise is never simple. How have you experienced that for yourself, Rama?
I mean, it's not simple. And wouldn't it be nice if we were to come up with a framework for your daughter and my granddaughter to be able to not have to go away and back, but rather just go through? It's been difficult, but for some reason or another, I've been blessed to have a very stubborn approach to doing just what I want. It hasn't always been to my benefit. So I've sacrificed financially, I've sacrificed through promotions because I didn't want to let go of my feminine side. And to me, there was a logic to the way I was thinking. And I kept doubting the other's ability to understand it. So it wasn't helpful at the time, but now I think I've developed enough of the language to be able to integrate the two, and thankfully have a beautiful community of women who've helped support me along the way, including my daughter, who's been incredible at telling it to me as it is. But yeah, I think surrounding yourself by women that you are inspired by, and being somewhat stubborn about your unique thumbprint and DNA that makes you so special, instead of trying to hide that to, rise in the ranks, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely do hope that we find a way to design a different approach to leadership that is doesn't require our daughters to do that journey back and forth before finding themselves again. I think that wish is something that I hold very dear to my heart. We have a couple more questions here about innovation. I think Rev asks, do crises in the region accelerate innovation or make leaders more risk averse in your view?
A combination. I wish we had statistics on that, but some people become like double down and come up with a lot more. And some of the innovations you see coming out of Gaza, of all places, are just mind-boggling. Like, how could you actually come up with anything under those circumstances? And that yet they do. I think they're a reflection of a basic need in human, which is to be recognized. We have a need to be recognized, and I think innovation is reaffirming that need. No, we are here, we exist, and we're recognized. Plus, it's a response to a need. And they say, I guess in Arabic, that
الحاجة أم الاختراع.
exactly.
Yeah, I was thinking about that actually as you were responding. Necessity is the mother of invention, I guess is how you would translate that. And so, yeah, I mean, for sure, just to answer Rev, like, of course, when your basic needs are threatened, there is a kind of an immediate reflex to become more risk averse. But as that first wave, passes through, we do become more innovative if we open ourselves up. And I think this whole conference has been about helping leaders hold space for both of those things. You do need to become risk averse about some things, but how do you keep space for innovation?
There's a saying that people say when you're faced with adversity in the Arab world. In Arabic, it's ajru afia. And so to me, it's like that's flipping the narrative on its head. Rather than shrink in, embrace what you're going through and know that there's a positive outcome from it. That's ajr. But in the frame of innovation, I always think this is like the hero's journey. You're going through the most difficult time because you're actually growing and coming out with something even more profound. So use this time to think there's something bigger out there. And if I focus on the positive, I'll find it. I'll see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about, innovation is also about tinkering. And we're very good at that over here in this region. It starts with tinkering and then it scales into something more. And we're really good at it because of how broken our systems are. So we've always had to come up with secondary plans for everything. Marie's asking if you have a perspective on what are the biggest untapped opportunities for innovation in the region today.
Wow, so many. I always have conversations with our team about what all of the cultural things that we are so incredibly proud of. Where do they exist in today's AI world? Very little of who we are, what we are, how we live, how our old souks function does not exist in the realm of artificial intelligence. Yet, so many of the AI and data scientists in Silicon Valley are of Arab or Middle Eastern origin. But what they lack is that link to data and the link to the thinkers beyond the pure technical space. And so that's a huge opportunity. Like if you think, for example, of Canva, if you search through Canva, do you find a representation of our scripts, our geometries, our, pictures? You don't. So that's a huge opportunity space that not enough people are exploring. And similarly, for example, on the natural world space, we have among the richest varieties of peaches or apricots. That in the world of plants is a very rich gift that can be explored in terms of the genetics of plants. Similarly with dates and others. So there are so many places to look, and some of the innovators are working on these exact areas.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned this, about how we could build that bridge between our world, the people at the forefront. There's a really great commentary here from one of our audience member. He says, or she says, I don't know, I can't tell their name, but when we talk about AI and modern technologies today, we often frame them as something new. But in many ways, they're built on foundations laid centuries ago in our region. For example, Al-Khwarizmi's work on algebra and algorithms continues to shape how we think about computation and AI today. So I'm curious, how can we better reconnect, again, speaking of bridges, with this legacy of knowledge and ensure it informs the way we build and lead in today's technological landscape?
I mean, I feel so privileged working at Qatar Foundation. Obviously, Her Highness's vision was incredible, but the fact that she was able to amass 40 institutions, many of them are involved in research in exactly these different topics, where you're invited to tap into the past, to look for the current experts in Arabic linguistics or in the religions of the region or the culture, and then fuse it with technology. Qatar Science, QCRI, Qatar Science and AI Research Center, has the leading large language model in AI within specifically Arabic and religion. They don't compete on other fronts with other large language models, but within those spaces, they're very capable. And it's because they created that environment where the two can be discussed. We have research grants for some of those topics. If you look at QRDI, on their website, they have a plethora of grants. And so if some of these areas intrigue you, you could look and see if there's a grant that matches your interest.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And of course,
Yeah,
of course, at the Qatar Science and Tech Park, we love to get ideas from founders who are exploring these spaces.
Yes, there's actually, Rama, quite a few questions about QTSP and the programs that you support. I didn't bring them into the conversation here today, but I'll link you to them later. And there's quite a lot of curiosity. And I think Jesse's answering a few of those. So thank you for that, Jesse. I see a lot of enthusiasm about your programs. Rama, to bring this closer to you as a leader, maybe personally, how do you bring this indigenous wisdom, what has been passed on to you, into how you show up and how you sustain your energy and your sense of purpose in these times?
I think one thing that came up for me at the beginning of the conflict is تفاءلوا بالخير تجدوه. That
Mhm.
when when how do you translate that? If you think of abundance, you'll get it, and if you think
Yeah.
of positivity, you'll get it. And so, this constant reminder on an hour by hour, day by day of this. And I have one person who works with me whose energy is very much about like this wisdom, this ancient wisdom. And so whenever I'm imbalanced, I go to his office and I always walk out with either a line of poetry or a verse that reminds me to return to that balance. So having the right people around you, as well as I think reminding yourself, and in practice, in the morning, I wake up and here at my desk, I have spread out all the positive hippy dippy magazines, as well as some of the wisdom books that I've had. And I try and kind of think of one inspiration from those that grounds me for the day.
I really love that. Actually, I'm going to show you here. I have this little, it's a deck of cards that was written by Maria Popova, who's like one, I don't know if you know her, Rama. She's like one of the OG like bloggers of the internet. And now I've just told everybody how old I am. But she did this, she calls it divinations. And it's just like pictures of birds with a little poem every day. I'm going to read you mine from today because this is one of the ways that I do it too. So today says, the radical move is to enter each day as a constant now, free from the clause of then and next, so you may take the open hand of the moment, nerved with pure being. So, I wake up to these things and they really help you to ground yourself, to stay present. So I resonate a lot, and especially the power of words. You mentioned earlier how some of our grandparents, the women in weddings who could like suddenly, improvise poetry about the bride, or the grandfathers who could, their use of words were really something to look back to and to keep us grounded. There are a few more questions. Maybe I'll take one last one from the audience before we wrap up. It's a powerful one. What is something we are still allowing others to define about us?
What isn't? Is the question. Honestly, what isn't? I was thinking about that yesterday. I forget the context, but if you look, like the glasses I'm wearing, the ring, the top, like all of this is defined with this like a genre of fashion. Everything is defined by the external. How many days do you wake up and think about what outfit can I wear that really just defines me and that's completely divorced from fashion? Or what am I eating that I truly like, that my body craves, not that I crave because I've seen a box of cereal or I've seen a thing, but what's my body craving? And the same with emotions, with like, what do I need? Like this morning I woke up thinking I need my granddaughters. Like I just want to hug them. I miss that so much. And I was thinking, can I just jump in a car over the weekend and get there and get that out of the way and like or enjoy that? But really, I think we need to be so critical of the world that we live in, because so much is being imposed upon us, especially today with social media. It's not like you're selecting a TV channel on a particular program. You're getting a stream of 30-second or 5-second things that you never thought you'd see. So, yeah, very loaded.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to let everybody know that I deleted Instagram and TikTok in September, and I've never been happier.
Well done. Since September?
Yeah. I've stood, the first month was really hard, but I made it through, and now I feel liberated, and my brain really thanks me for it because it's not constantly hijacked.
Fantastic. I salute you. Honestly, that's such a good move.
Yeah. It was definitely an addiction that I needed to get over, and it really helped. And that kind of actually brings us to our first, closing question. Because for me, a lot of becoming a better mom, a better leader, a better family member has been about being more present and more grounded. And you've already given us a few examples: your colleague, the words that you put around you, hugging your granddaughters. But one of the 4 questions that we ask to close off our session to every one of our speakers is, Rama, what keeps you grounded in the moment?
Those I love. Those I love.
Yeah, other humans. And in times like these, especially, what helps you to stay limitless, to keep space for possibility, for imagination? You mentioned curiosity earlier, but what's like a practice that you have that helps you to stay limitless?
The firm belief that we create the reality around us, and only we, with the unwavering focus on it, on what we want to see happen.
Yeah, beautiful. What do you think is a leadership quality from the Arab world that the rest of the world can learn from?
Presence.
Absolutely. That's for me been one of the biggest observations. You know, growing up in Lebanon, you really don't kind of talk or like sometimes the reaction is you put spirituality and religion on the side, but the spiritual practices of living here in the GCC and watching how present people are has been just incredible, and I'm very jealous.
There's a beautiful poem by someone. It's Ya kullu kulli kun li in lam takun li faman li, and it's just pretty much all about just summoning your entire being to this present moment.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll find it. We'll put it in the links. And maybe one last question is, based on our conversation today and all the various topics we've touched upon, what are 3 things that you would advise leaders to do right now to stay connected with their wisdom in this time of uncertainty?
Find a path to nature, at least once a day. Commune with nature, even if it's a little plant, and reflect on it. Be with loved ones, and read something, anything, whether it's for a paragraph or more, from our history, especially the lighter part of our history.
Thank you so much for that. And again, I don't know if you love him or don't, but Roy Casagranda is the great place to start. Although he is not from the region, he is married to someone from a neighboring country, and he spent most of his career researching and rewriting history of the Arab world. Has had some great sessions at the Museum of the Future that are available to watch on YouTube. I always love learning about my own history through his lectures. He's also very entertaining, so that would be where I would get people to start. Thank you, Rama. Thank you so much, first, for bringing this topic to us, because you're the one who brought it to us and not the other way around. You know, when we said we want to talk about leadership from the region, this idea of indigenous wisdom was your gift to us and to our audience. So I'm really, really very grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure talking with you, like always.
As always, honestly, and you can see, I mean, there's 100 million comments on this thread. The audience really enjoyed this, and I know that it prompted a lot of thinking and reflection for them as well. So very grateful to everyone who tuned in, for being here, for your presence, for your questions, and for learning with us. We really appreciate it. As always, the session will be available here on LinkedIn. We'll publish it later as a YouTube video and a podcast. If you want to re-listen to it, because sometimes conversations are worth listening to twice, or if you want to share it with someone who you think might find it inspiring, please do pass it along. And as I said at the beginning of the session, we have made it our mission to talk about the wisdom from this part of the world and leadership in the Arab world. And we have a really short survey for us to capture how you see leaders in our region navigating this moment and what others can learn from us. Please take 4 minutes of your time just to fill out that survey. It would really, really mean a lot to us. And we'll send you the white paper that we write after it. We'll continue these conversations over the coming weeks through our webinar series and leaders circles, and you can find our full schedule on the website. Our next session is a little harder, a little more masculine, let's say. It's tomorrow. It's decisive and compassionate, how to lead through a downsizing, because unfortunately, many organizations in the region are going to have to do that. but how do you keep it, compassionate? That's the discussion we'll be having with the founders of Tandem, 12 p.m. Dubai time tomorrow. And in the afternoon, we'll be joined by Aline Kamakian, who is the owner of Mayrig, but more recently really brought to life her mission of food and community by putting together Sufra, which raises money to help feed people and keep restaurants open. That's tomorrow at 4 p.m. UAE time. Thank you again for being with us, and we hope to see you in the next session.